I certainly consider mass shootings a health crisis, and we are doing for the first time real studies to find out what the etiology of that is. And we're looking for the first time at psychiatric drugs. You know, these kind of mass shooting, people have had guns in this country forever. When I was a kid, we had shooting clubs at our school. People, kids, my classmates, other people, would bring a .22 rifle with their guns to school and park it in the parking lot. Nobody was shooting. So there's never been a time in America, in the history of humanity, and people walked into a crowd, into a church or a movie theater or a school or a crowd of strangers and just started randomly shooting. It's happening in our country. It's not happening around the world. And there are many other countries that have comparable levels of guns that we have in this country. We had comparable levels in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and people weren't doing that. Something changed, and it dramatically changed human behavior. And one of the culprits we need to examine is whether the fact that we are the most over-medicated nation in the world, and that a lot of those are psychiatric drugs that have black box warnings on them that warn of suicidal and homicidal ideation. So we are doing those studies right now for the first time.
For the first time. That is quite an admission. Joining me now, Dr. Josef Witt-Doerring, CEO and Medical Director of Taper Clinic and host of Side Effects with Dr. Josef. Doctor, okay, so we'll set aside that we're doing these studies for the first time. What he says is noticeably true. We've always had guns. Now we have psychos walking into schools and churches, murdering people before they blow their heads off. And it's unbelievably terrible. We need to get to the root of the problem. What is it?
So when we look at what is causing mass shootings, I think there is, surely there's an element of mass contagion going on. But what Bobby says about the psychiatric drugs being involved is completely true. If you listen to the media these days, they will say that you're a conspiracy theorist if you even suggest that these drugs can do such a thing. But it's hiding in plain sight. I mean, if you look at the drug labels, like he mentioned, for SSRIs, it already says that they can cause aggression and hostility. It already says that they can make people who are not suicidal. If you look at the side effects for stimulant medications, in the warnings and precautions, which is one of the areas on the drug which has the most important risk, it already lists hostility and aggression. If you look at the drug Abilify, a popular antipsychotic drug given to people, it already lists homicidal ideation in there. These side effects are there because doctors and the pharmaceutical industry have known for a long time that these drugs, in rare instances, I want to say that, these are not the common effects, these are the paradoxical effects from the medications, that in rare instances, they can make some people more aggressive. And so, it's like, imagine you have like 10 people smoking some cannabis, right? 9 people, they're sitting around giggling, having a good time, and one person is getting paranoid. The same thing happens with psychiatric medications. Some people, just for reasons that we don't understand, respond in a negative way, and they can become more aggressive. And there's actually been, and the media never talks about this, there's actually been several cases out there which have gone to the courts where judges and jurors have found that these drugs have been involved in suicides and also mass homicide.
Doctor, do we believe that it has something to do, I know we don't know yet, as you just pointed out, but does this have something to do with your mental state going into the use of it, or is it genetic? What is it that has, as you said, 9 people can take it and maybe they're a little lethargic and the last one turns into a demon who murders Catholic school kids? How in the world can the results be so different?
Yeah, and that you're putting your finger on something that's really unique, that these drugs can have a spectrum effect, right? Let's say, for instance, you already have someone who is harboring some kind of homicidal thoughts. You put them on a medication that's disinhibiting, a medication that is blunting their emotions. And this is what a lot of these medications do, especially things like SSRIs. They may be more likely to act on pre-existing thoughts. However, what I do want to say, and this is where it's going to sound like kind of almost demonic, these medications can make some people so psychotic that even people who never had a hint of violence, they can actually go and do terrible things. You know, two cases come to mind. Um, and this is a little bit dark, but I think it's important to talk about this topic. You know, there was the case of Donald Shell in Wyoming in the 90s. Now, Donald Shell had been exposed to I think it was Prozac. It's an SSRI medication, and he had a very bad reaction to it. He actually became more agitated. He went and saw another doctor who put him on Paxil, which is actually another SSRI in the same class as Prozac. Now, normally this should never happen. You know, if you have a bad reaction to a drug in a class, a doctor doesn't give you a drug in that same class later on, but because of poor record keeping and bad communication, that happened. Now, within a week, Don Shell killed his wife, his daughter, and his granddaughter, and then he killed himself. This went before a jury, and they found that SmithKline was 80% responsible for what had happened. This resulted in $1 million verdict. And that's just one case. You know, and another case was, and these are some of the most heartbreaking stories you'll ever hear. Another very well-known case was David Carmichael. This was a Canadian man, never had a history of violence, loving father, all of those things. He actually took a medication, Paxil again, I believe, and within a week, he killed his son by accident. He became completely psychotic and delusional. I think his son had a seizure disorder, and so that was it. That was like the nut. His son had a seizure disorder, but when he took the medication, he started to believe that his son was going to die, and that the most compassionate thing to do would be to put him out of his misery. He woke up in jail several weeks later, realizing what he had done, and now he speaks about this all over the country. And so, yes, I do think you can have like a spectrum issue where someone who might be a little bit on edge already can get pushed into it. But I also think in some people who are very unlucky, it can be entirely the drug and the manic type psychosis reaction that pushes them into this.
Gosh, that is scary stuff. Doctor, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes tonight. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.